Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is. As always, happy whatever day it is. Welcome to Left Side of the Aisle. I'm your host. My name is Larry Erickson, and for the next almost half hour, I'm going to be your ranter and raconteur, talking about things important to me I think are deserving of your attention. As always, comments, questions, reactions, whatever, can be sent to me directly. Email address is whoviating, WHOVIATING at AOL.com. And if you didn't catch that, which you probably didn't, you can go to my website, Lotus Surviving a Dark Time, and you can get the email address from there, or you can leave a comment there if you'd rather. If you do send me email, please be a little patient. I can be slow about answering my email, but I do answer it. You will get an answer. And please include something in the subject line like your cable show or Left Side of the Aisle, something obvious so I know it's not spam. Now, I'm going to tell you, actually, this week's going to be a little bit different. I need a break from all this heavy political stuff. So basically, the entire second half of the show is going to be examples of what we call, it's our occasional feature, it's called And Another Thing. And it's just some cool science stuff. So you can look forward to that. But I'm going to start, as I like to, whenever I can, with some good news. And there's some two bits of at least even cool news, you could call it, demonstrating how the Westboro Baptist Church of Topeka, Kansas, which, by the way, is not affiliated with any Baptist convention, the Westboro Baptist Church may be actually now doing more for the cause of justice than they are against it. First, you may have heard about how country music star Vince Gill got in the faces of some of the church flakes when they went to protest a concert of his because he got divorced and remarried. I guess just calling gay people fags just doesn't have the pizzazz that it used to. Even better is the news from Planting Peace. This is the group that runs Equality House. This is the rainbow-colored house that sits across the street from the compound of the bigot-boasting so-called church. The house is going to be the site in October of Planting Peace's first annual Equality House drag-themed walkathon. Quoting their Facebook page, "We are inviting you, your family, and your friends to all come out and parade around the Westboro Baptist Church with us, whether in costume or not, but either way, raising the money for the Equality House and looking fabulous during the whole event." The event will be called the Drag Down Bigotry Walkathon, and yes, I'm sure it will be fabulous. All right, from there, getting to the big thing of the week. I said last week that I was going to spend some time this week talking about the frightening notion of how many people have embraced the idea that President Obama would have had the power to bomb Syria even if Congress disapproved. And that I talk about it because this will remain an issue. No matter what happens with Syria, even if there is a peaceful negotiated settlement, even if there's an agreement that doesn't involve U.S. bombs, this whole idea is still going to be an issue. So let's do that now. Because the thing is, the White House has certainly made this argument. The White House has insisted repeatedly, loudly, arrogantly even, that Barack Obama, our Nobel Peace Prize president, the very amazing Mr. O himself, would have the authority to make war on Syria not only without congressional consent, but even in the face of express congressional disapproval. The New York Times reported this. Obama might still authorize force even if Congress rejected it. CBS News reported it. Senior officials said that President Obama may still decide to strike Syria even if Congress disapproves of military action. Time reported it. Obama might still attack Syria even if Congress issues a rejection. And White House officials said it themselves. They said it themselves. Caitlin Hayden, she's a spokeswoman for the White House and the National Security Council, said Obama's decision-making will be guided by what is in the best interest of the United States, which apparently he alone gets to define. White House counsel Catherine Rumler said a strike without congressional approval would be lawful under both domestic and international law because of the important national interest involved. And this is true even if, quote, it may not fit under a traditionally recognized legal basis under international law. In other words, it's not legal under international law, but it is anyway. Deputy National Security Advisor Tony Blinken argued, quoting, the president has the authority to act, even if Congress voted down the Syria resolution, which it surely would have. Secretary of State John Kerry said Obama has the right to do this no matter what Congress does. Official presidential liar to the press Jay Carney said Obama has authority as commander-in-chief to take action, and congressional approval enhances the argument but isn't required. And Obama himself said that, well, he wasn't going to speculate on what he might do. What they are actually saying, and I said this last week, what they are actually saying is that the president, any president, has the power to ignore the Constitution and the Congress and attack any country, anywhere, anytime, whenever that president, on his own authority, without anybody being able to say otherwise, decides this is a good idea. The problem here is that it's not only administration flunkies that are saying this. For example, John McCain, who's never seen a Middle East war that he didn't want to make bigger, said it would be harder for Obama to intervene in Syria if Congress vetoes the idea, but not impossible because he has ample precedent for acting without the approval of Congress, and apparently in the face of distinct disapproval. And the thing is, it's not just the right. It's not just the right. There are voices on the left, or at least among the supposed liberals among us, who are saying the same thing. There's this guy, Josh Marshall. You may not have heard of him, but he's this great liberal journalist who runs one of the big, more or less liberal news sites on the web. It's called Talking Points Memo, or TPM. And he said, I'm quoting him here, "I would put the War Powers Act to one side because no sitting president of either party has ever accepted that the War Powers Act is actually binding on the president. On the constitutional front, you frequently hear that only the Congress has the power to declare wars, but the president's role as commander-in-chief of the armed forces gives him effective power to use the armed forces in various ways without a declaration. This really big grant of power in the commander-in-chief role isn't something you can simply write off." The thing is, and what this reveals is, the point is that's what keeps coming up. Why, he's the commander-in-chief. Obama's the commander-in-chief. That's what he is. He's the commander-in-chief. You know, I remember back during the Watergate days, there was a moment when the Nixon gang decided they were going to try to shut down the whole investigation. And Nixon had his chief of staff, Alexander Haig, tell Attorney General Elliot Richardson to fire Special Watergate prosecutor Archibald Cox. Richardson, to his credit, refused, upon which Haig said to him, "Your commander-in-chief has given you an order." Now, that quote became infamous. The thing is, Haig was active military at the time, but he was in a civilian office, chief of staff. And the idea, people were genuinely shocked that someone in a civilian office speaking to a civilian would refer to the president as commander-in-chief instead of as president. But that was then, and this apparently is now. Now it's considered proper, indeed reasonable. Indeed, it's unreasonable to think of it otherwise. It's reasonable to think of Obama as your commander-in-chief, even when dealing with civilian authority, and to think of that role as commander-in-chief as overriding that civilian authority. And frankly, I ask you, what could be more dangerous to the Constitution? What could be more dangerous to a constitutional form of government to have military authority outrank civilian authority? For military authority to be able to do as it thinks best, not only in the absence of approval, but in the face of active disapproval. Glenn Greenwald noted that, quoting him, "It's a potent sign of how low the American political bar is set, that we're supposed to be, and a lot of us apparently are, grateful that Obama deigned to even ask Congress for this authorization before he starts bombing another country, even though the vote is meaningless, according to him, because he says he could go ahead and do whatever he pleases anyway." And please, don't give me this business about implied powers or implied powers authority under the Constitution and all the rest of that, because bluntly, that's all crap. Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution says, quoting, "The President shall be Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and of the militia of the several states when called into the actual service of the United States." That is, the president, thus, is the highest-ranking military officer. He's the highest-ranking officer in the military chain of command. And putting this power in the hands of a civilian office was a deliberate, conscious decision. Now, on the other hand, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution does give Congress, yes, the power to declare war, but its role is actually much wider than that. Section 8, Congress has the power under Article 1, Section 8, among other things, to provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States, to define and define piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the laws of nations, to declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water, to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years, to provide and maintain a navy, to make rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces, to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections and repel invasions, and to provide for the organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States. In other words, Congress is heavily involved in the structure and process of military affairs, involved in raising, organizing, regulating, and importantly, authorizing military forces. For all of the blather about, well, this case, and well, that case, and well, this interpretation, and all of the attempts to justify the unjustifiable by verbal hocus pocus and hokum, that basic premise seems quite clear to me. The president decides how the armed forces will be used. The Congress decides when and if they will be used and under what guidelines. That basic principle, one Barack grossly violated in Libya and was apparently completely prepared to grossly violate in Syria. I mean, by doing so, he spit on a constitution and disgraced himself and his office. That basic principle, to me, just doesn't seem that complicated. The president decides how, the Congress decides if. But the fact is, the real world is rarely as clear as basic principles. And so, after a long train of abuses and usurpations, Congress asserted its will in the War Powers Act of 1973, which was passed over presidential veto. Yeah, the War Powers Act. That's the one that our liberal journalist friend Josh Marshall wanted to put aside because presidents have just declared it's non-binding, as if a press release from the White House is what determined law. The War Powers Act was an attempt to reestablish the role of Congress while recognizing the fact that emergencies can arise. The heart of the War Powers Act is Section 2C, and it says, in full, the constitutional powers of the President as Commander-in-Chief to introduce United States Armed Forces into hostilities or into situations where imminent involvement in hostilities is clearly indicated by the circumstances are exercised only pursuant to 1, a declaration of war, 2, specific statutory authorization, or 3, a national emergency created by attack upon the United States, its territories or possessions, or its armed forces. That is, the President may commit U.S. military forces only in the cases of specific grants of authority or in reaction to an emergency. Neither of those cases existed in Libya. Neither of them exist in Syria. In fact, Obama himself said one of the reasons he was willing to go to Congress is because Syria did not present an immediate threat to the United States. Instead of recognition of this basic principle, instead of a basic recognition of the divisions of powers, we were faced, and in a short time may be faced again, with the prospect of the president ordering the bombing of a sovereign nation not because of an attack, not because of a threat, not even because of a claimed threat, but in order to look resolute, to maintain credibility, to not look weak or indecisive. Well, government officials such as John Kerry, who seems to be spending his entire career running away from his Vietnam War days. Government officials saying that the president can do this because he is not bound by law. And we are supposed to passively accept this as right and proper. In April 1977, during his interviews with Richard Nixon, David Frost asked him about the limits of presidential authority. Nixon's answer was, quoting, "When the president does it, that means it's not illegal," By definition, Freud asked. Exactly, Nixon answered. That exchange produced a collective gasp in the country. The idea that a president could declare himself above the law, that stunned people, and it actually sank Nixon's hopes to have these series of interviews rebuild his shattered reputation. And again, though, times have apparently changed. And now we have a president declaring in effect that neither the law nor the constitutional powers of Congress can constrain his ability to use the military in any way, at any time, and at any place that he deems fit. Not only is no imminent threat required, there need be no threat at all. And Congress not only doesn't have to give approval, either before or even after the fact, in fact, Congress should be ignored altogether. And I got to tell you, if that notion, if the continuing move in that direction that this represents, that this establishes, if the premises that this establishes, if the precedents that this establishes, if this doesn't disturb you, then not only is your sense, your understanding of freedom quite different from mine, your understanding of democracy and the nature of a free republic is as well. Because I see this idea, this growing acceptance of this idea as truly, truly dangerous. McCain said a couple of weeks ago that this is a critical moment for the U.S. It is, just not in the way he meant. I will leave this with two last thoughts. One, there was a bit of hope in that NBC News poll I mentioned last week that had a whopping 79% of the American public saying that the president should be required to get congressional approval before taking any military action against Syria. The other one is this quote: "The president does not have power under the Constitution to unilaterally authorize a military attack in a situation that does not involve stopping an actual or imminent threat to the nation," quote unquote. Those were the words of then candidate for president, Senator Barack Obama, to the Boston Globe on December 20th, 2007. And as a footnote to all of this, since the hopes to avoid war now in Syria involve around getting rid of chemical weapons, just as a footnote to this, the U.S. has been taking steps to destroy its own stocks of chemical weapons since the 1990s, and has actually also helped other nations destroy theirs. It promised to complete this task by 2012. It failed. The United States still has over 2,600 tons of mustard gas and 524 tons of other lethal gases and nerve agents, many of which are contained within munitions, including rockets, artillery shells, landmines, spray tanks, and aerial bombs. Right now, the best estimate of when all this will be neutralized is 2023. Now again, the U.S. has been doing this. They've been dismantling their weapons and even helping other nations do the same. But the point is, you need to keep that in mind when talk about deadlines for Syria to get rid of all its weapons come up. Syria's stocks are likely to be much smaller than ours are or ever were. But the point is, it's hard to actually get rid of all these weapons. And when we talk about deadlines, we need to keep that in mind. Anyway, we're going to take a break. Hi, and we're back. And as I told you before, for the rest of the show, we're just taking a break from politics for the rest of this week. I just got some cool science stuff to share with you. It's part of our occasional feature. It's called And Another Thing. The first thing I'm going to tell you about is that the world's largest volcano has been found. It's under the ocean, under the Pacific Ocean. It's called Tamu Massif. And the size of this volcano dwarfs Mauna Loa in Hawaii, which is the previous thought to be the biggest volcano in the world. In fact, this volcano is only 25% smaller than Olympus Mons on Mars, which is the largest volcano in the entire solar system. The Tamu Massif is giving you one of the reasons I had trouble finding it is that it's only 2.5 miles tall. Apparently, the way these things erupt is that they erupt slowly and just spread the lava out very slowly, very gradual kind of flows. So it's only 2.5 miles tall, but it's 400 miles wide. This actually is bigger than the state of New Mexico in area. It's actually, apparently the last time it erupted was about 144 million years ago. It's been extinct since then. But it's a class of volcano that apparently has not been recognized before. There's these things called oceanic plateaus. They're just sort of rises in the ocean, and geologists are starting to realize that, yeah, these actually are old volcanoes, but just that the flows spread out in a wide direction. And so finding about Tasu Massif may help them understand better how these kind of things form. These oceanic plateaus, they are the largest outflows of lava on Earth, and they actually have been linked to mass extinctions and climate change, so they are a significant thing. But by the way, in case you're wondering, this volcano apparently was never above the surface. The peak of the volcano was never above the surface. It's been hidden because it sits on a thin portion of the Earth's crust called the lithosphere, which can't support the weight of the volcano. So if it was all packed up and tall, it would just sink back down again. So its top now is actually about 6,500 feet, nearly 2,000 meters below the ocean's surface. So that's right, it's the largest volcano in the world. Here's another cool thing I think is really cool. There's a lot of concern among linguists about the fact that a number of languages around the world are dying. However, they've now discovered one just been born. It was created by children living in a remote village in northern Australia. The village is called Lajumanu. And the language is called Walpiri Rampaku, which means light Walpiri. See, the local language is Walpiri. It's also now being called Strong Walpiri. It's an Aboriginal language, which is spoken among about 4,000 Australian Aborigines. But Walpiri Rampaku contains elements of English, Walpiri, and Creole, which is an English-based Creole, which developed in the late 1800s. But it has emerged as a mother tongue among recent generations of village children, and a lot of the people under 35 years old in this village speak light Walpiri as their native language. And the cool thing is light Walpiri can't be a pidgin, because a pidgin requires that they're not native speakers. It can't be a Creole because a Creole is a combination of two languages, and this language actually has its own grammatical rules. This is a genuine language. In fact, it is now so well established among the young people in this village that the elders there are wondering if Walpiri itself, the so-called Strong Walpiri now, whether or not that will survive. Because while the younger generation speaks both, they have the one as their own preferred native language. And the concern is another generation, original Walpiri, may disappear in the face of a new language. That's interesting, I think, itself, too. Now, here's something, a third thing. Scientists have discovered signs of life in mud samples that were extracted from the bottom of a subglacial lake in Antarctica. They uncovered microbes that date back nearly 100,000 years, along with about 23% of the organisms they found were unidentified, organisms previously unknown to science. The science drilled through an ice sheet covering Lake Hodgson on the Antarctic Peninsula. The lake's ice is currently about 10 to 13 feet thick, but 100,000 years ago, during the last ice age, it was more than 1,300 feet thick. The researchers drilled through the ice and another 305 feet down to actually drill into the bottom of the lake and take up these sediments. They said the upper few centimeters, which would be the most recent sediment, it contained recent organisms. But as they continued to drill, they found fossilized fragments of DNA belonging to numerous microbes that appear to have adapted to the extreme conditions of living in an Antarctic lake. Several types of bacterial species known to science, but they said, again, 23% of them are unknown. I kept flashing on I forgot the X-Files kind of things of the microbes in Antarctica, but that's a much different story. The studies are going to continue. And the other thing important about this is about studying how things have survived in extreme environments can also tell us more about how life might exist or develop on other planets. One last thing. This is a baby picture. This is a baby picture. It's a baby star. It's a baby star. It was taken by the ALMA telescope in Chile. And Chile, this is a great place to do this because this is set actually in the Atacama Desert in Chile, which is one of the driest places on Earth. This place it makes the Sahara look like a rainforest. It's but the driest place on Earth, which also means that the air is incredibly clear, incredibly crisp. This is wonderful for satellites, for telescopes rather. And what the image shows is material streaming from the baby star. And the baby star, by the way, if you see that little sort of blue area within that cloud, that's the star. And you see all that material streaming out from the star, being ejected out from the star at incredible speed, and as it plows into the surrounding gas and dust, it heats it up and makes it glow and makes it visible. These illuminated jets you see are actually spewing out faster than any have ever been measured before. So that is really cool too. But that's it for the week. We will see you again back next week. You just go ahead and have the best week you possibly can. We'll be back to the blood and the gore and veins in my teeth and things like that. Next week, you have the best week you can. Bye.